So, welcome to another episode of Beta Talk. This season is being sponsored by Primary Pro, which is an outside pipe insulation system that a lot of my good friends are using. Check them out on their website. And today I'm joined by Charlotte Lee, who is the CEO of the Heat Pump Association, and Craig Dolan, who is currently the chair of the Heat Pump Association. So we're going to talk a little bit about what they do, and we'll just dive into it. Craig, you're the chair, and Charlotte, you're the CEO. The CEO was a new position, was it? That sort of it was engendered probably 3 years ago now. Charlotte, is that right?
2023, April 2023. I was employed, so I've been in post 2 years now.
Oh, blimey! I'm trying to speed up time. We don't need to do that. It's going too quick as it is. So how long's first question is great. How long's the Heat Pump Association been going? Because I think it was something under FETA, and we'll probably have to explain what FETA is. I don't know if it's still associated with FETA.
Yeah, of course. So we're actually 20 years old this year, which is a milestone in itself. But as you say, we've recently been sort of reconstituted in 2021. So prior to 2021, we existed as an association within the FETA group. And FETA is the Federation of Environmental Technologies Association, and they have a number of different associations under that umbrella. In 2021, the then chair and vice chair and the members took it upon themselves took the decision to formalise the HPA as its own limited company. So we are now owned and operated by our members for our members. And whilst we still use FETA to provide secretariat support services to the association, we are very much now an independent trade body standalone that operates, as a single entity in itself.
And Craig, the chair, is that a 2-year position or a 1-year position?
Oh no, it's a 2-year position. So,
Yeah.
so the way it works is you get voted in as vice chair, and you serve as vice chair for 2 years, and then after 2 years you move into the chair position for 2 years, and a new vice chair comes in. So we have a bit of continuity. So I was vice chair when Phil Hurley was chair, and then took over from Phil, and then Mark Wilkins is vice chair, and he'll take over from me in September.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the 2 years has gone remarkably quickly.
It has, hasn't it? I remember when so 20 years. We're an anniversary year then. So history's quite interesting, isn't it? Who were the original were there original founders of the Heat Pump Association, or were there particular manufacturers that sort of came together to start it up, or do we know that?
That's a
great question. We'll have to take it away and come back to you. I don't know.
I mean, I suppose one thing is it helps people realise, this industry has been around a while. It's not. Some people obviously think heat pumps is a new thing, and but people, I know engineers that have been installing for 20 years. So it's not a new thing, is it?
No. As you've spoken about a number of times, heat pumps aren't a new technology. Arguably they're being seen as a new technology because they're being used in a slightly different way, and we're starting to move into, or we have moved into domestic heating now, heating and hot water, whereas before they were probably, air conditioning, more commercial applications with the RF systems and all of that. And, everybody's got a heat pump in their home because it's a fridge.
Yeah.
Probably something we want to get into, but heat pump's probably not the best name, but it's the one that we're stuck with. It's been operating for years, and starting to move into the domestic market now.
Now, Charlotte, you come from the policy world previously, don't you? So I'm assuming we'll obviously discuss what the Heat Pump Association does, what its sort of mission is, but obviously policy is a big part of that, and that was your world before you came to the HPA, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always had, in my career anyway, been policy orientated and stakeholder engagement as well within my roles. So that's definitely my my area of expertise, as it were. But I'm becoming ever more technical every day, Nathan, although I absolutely would not proclaim to be technical or to have, technical discussions. But it's really important, I feel, to understand and get into the detail of the challenges, which invariably links with the policy discussions and decisions anyway. So you've got to make sure that that you have a good level of understanding in order to support the trade.
What are the sort of the main policies at the moment that the HPA are interested in? Obviously, I mean, the spark gap we know is one, isn't it? That's one of them.
Yeah, so I guess our two main asks at the moment are the electricity and gas pricing and rebalancing that, along with the introduction of the Future Homes and Building Standard, which we understand is coming. But the sooner that comes, the better. And of course, there will, even once it's announced and the regulations are laid, there will be a delay before it really bites in terms of ensuring new build properties are built with clean heating technologies. So those two are our sort of pivotal asks right now. But really, we're waiting on the detail of the Warm Homes Plan, which, although it's called a Warm Homes Plan, will cover all buildings. So it will cover commercial and as well. But that's the bit of policy, I think, that the sector is waiting to see the government ambition and the government intent in terms of supporting the market growth.
And do you guys regularly meet with the Energy Department?
Yes, yeah. So we really do have good working relationship with the officials within DESNZ and MHCLG, and the building safety regulator as part of MHCLG, and also DFE. But DESNZ are probably our key focus areas. We've been involved in a lot of the warm homes round tables that actually Minister Farn Bollet has been leading, and it's fantastic to see her engagement with the sector and her desire to hear directly from the sector. And so, we.
So you're a membership organisation, and you have different types of members. You've got your executive members, your full members. I think you've got associates, if I'm right, and then installers. Was the installers one quite new, or has that always been where installers can join?
Yeah, so I think, we said at the start, really, from 2021, the association sort of got kick-started again. And that took a couple of years to get the constitutions and the articles of association and everything sorted out. And then in 2023, they employed a full-time employee. And since then, we've got two more and are growing. The installer membership category is relatively new and was introduced in 2024. We know that installers and engaging with installers is absolutely crucial to this transition, and we're undertaking a review of that installer membership category now. And indeed, we are enhancing it. And this year, soon, we will be introducing an installer representative role. So what we found, and you would know this anyway, is that the way that we typically host and engage with our members as an association is through workshops, roundtables, virtual webinar meetings, discussions that generally happen between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And the members that attend are paid by their businesses to represent their member interests at stakeholder events. We know that doesn't really work for installers, because that is the time that they're on the job doing the work, and therefore engaging or trying to engage with them in that way isn't appropriate. So what we're looking to do is change our approach to engaging with installers. As I said, we'll be introducing an installer representative role, which is an individual that's employed by one of our installer member businesses, but they're elected, so there'll be sort of a vote process from the installer members to choose somebody. So they'll put themselves forward. There'll be a vote to choose that person, and then they will represent the installer community at our meetings, but we will reimburse them for their time, so it's not sort of lost income on the tools, and they will be there to be the voice of the installers. So in the background, they'll have been collating and listening and engaging with the installer network, and then attending the meetings to provide that voice. And we're also going to be having some sort of, well, we're calling them drop-in sessions, but they'll be in the evening, so sort of 6 o'clock time, where installers can, they're not formal, there's not a formal agenda or a formal presentation. It's a drop-in session where we at the HPA can tell the installers what we're hearing from policy and whether and get their views on that policy design, and they can tell us what's happening and what they're experiencing on the job, and we can better reflect that back within our discussions. So really excited about that initiative, and we've already had a great sort of interest from installers wanting to do that role, which I think is really positive. And hopefully they'll be in post for the installer show, and we can sort of launch it formally there.
Oh, right. And I think I'm right in thinking there's a LinkedIn group that if an installer is a member, they then can join that group. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think socials it's social media. It's easier to engage in, out of hours, whenever. So we tend to use that to post information that's pertinent to installer businesses, because, we send a lot of information and people are busy. So it's how do we get the most important bits of information to them quickly.
Well, as you both know, I did a post on LinkedIn, didn't I, asking if anyone wanted to ask the HPA or get me to ask on behalf of them, the HPA, any questions. I mean, most of the people contacted me directly. They didn't put it on the actual post and people have been asking me to ask questions of the HPA. And before we do that, I just want to caveat for my listeners. So I know Charlotte. I've met Charlotte a few times, and I've met Craig, and I really, really like them. I class them as friends. Craig's been in the industry a long time, and obviously, like myself, we kind of know the workings and machinations of the industry, don't we, Craig? And Craig and I sometimes will have a phone call. I grew up on building sites. I can swear like a trooper in my personal life. I don't do it on my podcast, but Craig and I will have these discussions, and I always end them and think, oh, it's always nice to speak to Craig, even though we're effing and blinded sometimes about certain situations, which I suppose highlights the fact that we're in an industry that obviously is transitioning. There's a lot of opinions flying about it. We also know there's a lot of disinformation, etc., etc. So it's exciting. I mean, one of the questions, I suppose, the first one is a very generic question: is are associations actually needed now that we sort of live in a world of social media? So before, if you go back within our industry quite a few decades ago, no such thing as social media. So people weren't hearing the voices, for instance, of consumers and installers. An association was basically, if they're a manufacturer association, people coming together kind of behind closed doors and discussing how the industry would go. We don't live in that world now. Obviously, social media is quite a big, powerful platform that people can express opinions and ask questions. I mean, so it's quite a generic question. One of the questions is, is the HPA needed? Are associations needed in our industry? Because we're probably going to talk a little bit about how historically associations may have veered us technically down the wrong path slightly. But I mean, are associations a value to the industry?
Well, I suppose that's you'd be very, very surprised if we said no. Well, yes, in that social media is very, very good for stating a point of view. It is less good when it comes to getting a consensus on a point of view. One of the leading things that we wanted to do at the HPA, and particularly my role as chair, was to become a leading sensible voice for the HVAC industry and making sure that we were being well-rounded and thoughtful and not always necessarily knee jerking in a certain area. And you know, me and you discussed that quite a number of times. From a policy point of view, particularly with government officials, like they need to have a clear guidance, and that's where associations can step in and support. And like we're not saying we're omnipresent and we get it right all the time, but we can get a group of interesting people together, and we put forward exam questions. If we take the spark gap, for example, I think everybody is of the opinion that the cost of electricity relative to gas needs to come down without putting the gas price up and putting more people in fuel poverty. But everybody's agreed on that point of view. How do you then make that happen? And that's where an association can step in, because like we invested some membership money doing a report a few years ago to talk about the different economical stuff, which is, you know, the boring treasury policy bit, to say if they moved levies from here to there, what would the impact be? What would the what were potential consequences, and all of that. And that's where associations step in. And you know, like the commissioning guide that we got very, very clear and robust feedback from, which stung a little bit, but it was good to get it. Like that commissioning document was pulled together by members to be a safety net when there wasn't a commissioning document together. And I know, you know, the BS standard on chemicals and stuff was a point. You know, thank you for the feedback. Good. I'm glad you got your red pen out and fed back. We can update it.
Yeah.
And we will update it. It's like, and that's where the association can step in. And you know, there have been areas in the past where probably the HVAC industry has taken an easier road than it should have done, and it probably could have been a bit more robust in what it was standing for. But you know, you can look back at history, but don't get caught staring. Like mistakes were made. We know what those mistakes were made, and or we think we know what they were. Let's not repeat them. So that's kind of where we are. But I can understand the point of view with social media. It's good for getting an opinion out. It's less good for getting a conciseness and the how. We need solutions. You spend a lot of time defining the problem, but then you need to bang some heads together to come up with a range of solutions.
Well, I mean, it's interesting about that whole thing of the commissioning document that you put out. So you put it out on, you know, you had a comms piece around it. Obviously, that involved LinkedIn. Some sort of engineers are sort of trying to sort of promote non-chemical. So for listeners who don't understand this, so commissioning, the HPA have worked hard to sort of produce a commissioning sheet that the installers can use, and it
Could a manufacturer's one not be available?
Yeah, and it highlighted chemical inhibitors, which is British Standard 7593. And of course, a lot of good engineers out there have sort of switched to using VDI 2035 methods, which is a German sort of method. And it was highlighted, wasn't it, Craig, on LinkedIn, that hadn't been mentioned in that committee. And Craig has gone away and sort of took that feedback on board. Now, I suppose my counter is that actual feedback came via social media. It didn't come via an installer working group. It was in an open space. You know the industry very well, Craig. You kind of know who's good and who's got good voices, and so you've took that feedback on board. But I suppose that came via social media, didn't it? To a certain extent.
It did. And then, you know, hopefully with this installer representative that we'll have moving forward, we'll get that feedback before it goes out. But like, it's always good to get feedback. Sometimes it can be a bit brutal, and I know that me and you've spoken about that before. But you know, it's good to get feedback. Like, you can have like the three of us, you can have excellence without perfection. So you know, we're always striving to get better. If something can be improved and we get feedback on social media, that's great. Like, hopefully we'll get the feedback from members earlier on, and it will be at a level that's high, and it's just tweaking around the edges. That's fine. Like the VDI 2035, it's similar to the BS standard, but it's not quite the same. I don't think it covers the flushing element. But if people are using different standards, then we can cite them, and or we can leave a box open to say what you have done, and that's fine. If people are looking for improvements, I'm all for that. Let's raise the standards.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of sort of where the association's role in that is putting together the document to start with. So it's that ability to provide the forum for the collaboration initially. Without an association, would a document like that have been published? Maybe not, or maybe there would have been lots of different versions of that. And of course, the feedback from different sources, as Craig said, is welcome, and we're trying to get that before it goes out, as we've discussed. But I think the other point about the value of associations is, and you know this, Nathan, government like to speak to. Government don't have time to speak to 100, 300, to 1,000 different organisations. And the other challenge around speaking directly to organisations is obviously there's always differing commercial interests, and that's a challenge even within an association, right? Because everybody's got their view, their way, their product. But I think where we add value is stepping back from those commercials and thinking, what do we need to better the industry, better the sector in its entirety? It's about getting the pie. How that pie is divided, that's nothing to do with me. That's not an association issue or an association problem. That's differing marketing and commercial arrangements and decisions. But a rising tide floats all boats, and I think that's where an association's role really is in standing up for the sector in its entirety, taking away some of those commercial nuances that can that make it harder for government to engage with individual businesses, which is why they like an association voice.
Yeah, it was a good point you picked up on there about how listening to feedback, there is feedback happening, and then you need an entity to actually then go and produce that document like you produced. That really good point.
Like the RCD guidance that we did, that we've just done, like that came about because members were saying, there's a bit of confusion about RCDs, and then we spent some time and we got membership opinion together and we wrote a document, and then we went to different industry experts to say, we're going to write this, is it correct? And different organizations in the electrical field fed in to make sure that what we were saying was technically correct, and then we went through and we published it. Without an association, guidance around RCDs would have been not aligned, if that makes sense.
No, it does make
it would have got aligned eventually, but it would have taken more time to get there.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, and that's a good point. And keep pulling me up on that point if I go on a trajectory, because I suppose there's a fear, obviously, with people that have been involved in the industry a long time and who trying to help in their individual ways the industry, that historically associations haven't done possibly and arguably what they should have done. And I think this is recognised, well, I know it's recognised all the way up to government level. So, for instance, the Control Manufacturers Association, who are part of BEMA, who I know you work with sometimes. The thing is with our industry, it's really interesting. Our industry, we've got these laws of thermodynamics. They're set in stone. So you've now got very, very intelligent customers and consumers and very intelligent people in the civil service who realise, crikey, what's been going on in this industry? We haven't really been controlling heating systems properly. They recognise it. So there's this recognition that the associations involved in our industry possibly haven't done what they should have done. And one of the questions I have been asked to ask you is, within your executive membership, you've got exactly the same people that have been in the boiler working group for the HHIC for decades, some of them. So when people talk, they talk about, I don't know anything about lobbying, Charlotte, you would, that's your expertise. But people talk about these lobbying groups. You say, you know, on the one hand, we've got this lobbying group that have been trying to promote hydrogen. I mean, that's gone quiet a little bit, but the hydrogen boiler thing. And then obviously you guys and me, we're promoting heat pump technology. But what has been put to me is that some of your executive members are exactly the same people that have been involved in that hydrogen sort of lobbying, I suppose, however that works. So they think there's a conflict of interests. So I don't know what sort of what your opinion is on that. They think there is a conflict of interest because exactly the same people that have been involved in that hydrogen lobby are kind of the executive people within your association.
I mean, I'm happy to come in on that. So, you know, we're the Heat Pump Association. Our mission, and you said, you know, what is the purpose? Our mission is to accelerate heat pump deployment throughout the UK. I think the challenge that the sector has faced is a lack of clarity from the government about the direction of travel. And if we look back 5 years, you know, hybrid heating systems, hydrogen, heat pumps, they were all on the agenda. They were all options, and R&D development and investment in all those different options has been happening over the last however many years because nothing got ruled out. And whilst, you know, we are expecting a consultation on hydrogen, on the role of hydrogen for heating this year, and hopefully, you know, we'll get a clear answer about what's happening there and where that's going. So we'll, you know, there's clarity for the sector. Within our membership and the attendees at our meetings, we're all very pro heat pumps and wanting to push them. I think those, what I would refer to as obligated parties under the Clean Heat Market Mechanism, for example, which are, you know, the companies that you're referring to, you know, they've got a very clear steer now from government that they need to, you know, install a certain proportion of their of heat pumps relative to their boiler sales. And we need those manufacturers and the other and all manufacturers, you know, to be working together to accelerate the deployment of heat pumps. And the investment that we've seen from those obligated parties into heat pumps within the UK over the last 2 years, for sure, has been massive. So, you know, I think the challenge is that there hasn't been clarity from government into the direction of travel of the transition, which has forced some of those businesses to hedge their bets.
Yeah.
But that's the detriment of acceleration, because it splits the budget. So, you know, the R&D investment is not focused, and that causes challenge. But I don't know, you know, and Craig will have a view as chair, but we don't come across challenges from internally within our association about the mission to accelerate heat pump deployment in the UK. You know, there is a universal agreement from all of our members that is the way we're going, the direction of travel, you know, the collaboration on how we can get there, how best from a policy point of view, from a guidance point of view, from an installer engagement point of view, you know, and that really is our focus.
Mm.
You know, just to build on that point, kind of like, I don't want to throw the government under the bus, but they did ask heating manufacturers to develop hydrogen boilers,
yeah,
and heat pumps and hybrid systems. So the HHIC, you know, born out of the gas board, like, were you expecting them to do anything else than back hydrogen? Really? Like that's their bread and butter. That's their culture. That's where they're born from. So obviously they were going to go and champion that message. Now, you're right. We do share some members. The HHIC are focused on gas, and Offtech are focused on oil, and the Heat Pump Association are focused on heat pumps. Now, conflict, maybe it's more like those companies making sure that they are still relevant in an evolving HVAC system. or HVAC market. Like, we want to promote heat pumps, and the gas price shock that we're still living through at the moment, with energy prices spiking and energy companies going bust, and all of that, and the impact of that has finally brought efficiency into focus. Whereas previously, you'll know the date better than me, we moved from non-condensing boilers to condensing boilers. What was that, 2 decades ago?
2005. Yeah, but they the HHIC were up at Westminster when they to celebrate that. I mean, ironically, that was brought in on April Fool's Day. So April Fool's Day this year, they were up there celebrating the sort of the 20th anniversary of that. Yeah.
Okay, so 2 decades. Yeah. So we're 2 decades in, and really within those 2 decades, we should have low temperature heating systems. It shouldn't be a debate. Like 80, was it 80/60 that it used to be? Like that shouldn't be a heating system anymore. Like high temperature should probably be 55. Like, but we didn't do that. Like in those 2 decades, there was opportunities with the Code for Sustainable Homes and things like that, where we should have moved from on-off controls to load compensation and weather compensation, and we didn't, for whatever reason. And there were lots of reasons not to do it, and there were a few reasons to do it. Like the cost saving when you changed from an on-off control to a load compensating or weather compensating control was minimal. And maybe we weren't as focused on efficiency and energy as we should have been. And now that we've had this price shock, efficiency is being pulled into focus, and that's good for the industry. But like realistically, we were probably a little bit lazy, and we should have done it earlier. But this is where you learn the mistakes of the past, but you can't get caught staring. And this is where we're trying to move on, and that's where associations, and we're working with other associations to make sure that efficiency and quality is being brought into focus.
And I just to counter, just to come in as a balanced view from Craig's view on, Offtec, initially they were oil, they're moving towards supporting heat pumps. They're a member of ours. They're actively designing training courses. HHIC, love them or hate them, they're moving more towards supporting heat pumps and guidance. So there does feel like there is a shift now coming in terms of everybody standing behind heat pumps as the primary route to decarbonising home heating in the UK. And yes, there'll be instances where heat pumps aren't suitable, or there are other routes that might be just as suitable as a heat pump. And we've heard government say things like 80% heat pumps, 20% other solutions. That's to be decided, and we'll see what happens in the Warm Homes Plan on that. But from where I'm sitting, there is a definite shift towards supporting, acknowledging that heat pumps will be the answer in the vast majority of cases if we are going to decarbonise homes in line with the net zero targets. And CCC's 7th carbon budget says exactly that too.
Yeah, we still get pushback on that though, don't we? We still get people always coming up with this term, there's no silver bullet, which basically means is we want to promote our alternative technology as much as possible. Listen to us. Interesting. I mean, you mentioned Offtec. My grandfather wrote their first standards, Charlotte, back in the day. So I know Offtec very, very well. But the HHIC obviously is a separate entity, and the two H's stand for hot water and heating. So I've always been a bit critical to them because they shouldn't just be representing gas. And like Craig said, I want to sort of re-emphasise that point. Craig is right. A lot of people don't realise it was the actual boiler manufacturers approached by government to research hydrogen boilers. It wasn't as if they said, "Oh, we want to sell loads of boilers. Let's stick it at hydrogen through them." They got approached by the government to research that, and obviously we know who they are. You know, a couple of them really sort of went to town with that and sort of did that work, and yeah, that sort of discussion's probably attenuated a little bit at the moment. We don't see at the shows anymore, sort of the hydrogen ready boiler type things, stuff like that, and there was none of that. Do you have to meet with HHI? I mean, are you sometimes in the same situation where you're with government and you've got the HHIC there, and then you've got you guys there, and going back to an earlier point, you know, some of the people in your association, exactly the same people that are in that association within the boiler working group. I mean, are there situations where you are all together?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, collaboration is key in this sector. And it's really important to collaborate. Like we don't have enemies. We don't want enemies. You know, we want to work together with the sector to get everybody on the same page and pushing for the same thing. You know, we worked collaboratively with HHIC, with BEMA, with the other heat pump associations on the update to the MIS 3005D standard around the change in terminology relating to hybrids to provide clarity on those within MCS. You know, we want to work with them to support what they do and what they publish to try and ensure that it reflects the heat pump market. Because why would we not? And I think, you know, that's where we come from. We might not agree on everything, but where we do agree, we should absolutely amplify that, because it makes the decision so much easier for government if we're all saying the same thing.
And it needs to be a system approach. Like, you know, we're the Heat Pump Association. We're focusing on the heat pump as the heat generator.
Oh, Craig, your sound levels have gone low for some reason.
Are they?
Yeah.
I'll just speak louder. So we need a system approach. Like the heat generator is what 1/3 or a quarter of the system, and then you've got the heating circuit itself, and you have the thermal storage, and you have the control. So, like, if we look at a traditional heating system, like the heating system, the emitter circuit, the controls, and the cylinder could all be set up the same way, and the only thing that changes is the heat generator. I know, okay, we can get into discussions about flow rates and emitter sizes and delta T's, but broadly speaking, we're heating water to make people comfortable, like that, and so people can have hot showers. Like, we've got far more in common than we have against each other. Like, we've got different views on how we get to the outcome that we want, which is comfortable, smart, efficient heating systems. Like, do you know? Can you understand where I'm coming from? It's kind of like we're all interlinked. It's a web. It's not a pillar.
Well, this is one of the reasons where some would argue the HHIC went wrong. They kind of were all about the heat generator, the boiler, and as I've said in many speeches, you know, that's just part of a system. I mean, because we were successful, wasn't we? The boiler industry became the biggest gas boiler industry in the world up until 2016, and you know, government were quite happy about that because it's, you know, creation of jobs and this kind of thing. But obviously now, I mean, there's some very clever people in the energy department now. Some of them, the civil servants. I mean, going back to that point, for instance, you know, I did a lunch and learn for about 40 civil servants the other day, and I introduced them to Tristan, who runs the Open Energy Monitoring site. So Tristan and I sort of did this sort of. So and this sort of comes back to this social media thing. So government obviously historically could only listen to associations, but now, you know, some, like I say, there's some very clever people in that department, and clever people all over who've become very interested in this industry. It's an exciting industry, you know. Heating is exciting. You know, laws of thermodynamics run the whole universe, and I think what people in the energy department have realised is, wow, there's some really clever consumers now that are monitoring their stuff, and let's chat to them, because you could argue they've been chatting to someone like the HHIC for a number of years and haven't really fully understood the science of heat. Whereas now they actually are getting that from your good installers, your customers, your podcasts like mine, for instance. Which is nice. They are interacting with these entities, but it still throws up this question. Well, what? Because the other question that's been posed to me is, when you have a manufacturers association, and you're not just a manufacturers association, as we know, but your executive members are mainly manufacturers. You've got manufacturers.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore. You've got energy companies as well. I mean, it's always interesting to me who is a full member and who's an executive member. That's quite interesting. We will talk about that in a minute. Because that's one of the things with the HHIC, that whole tier membership thing. Well, you've got a tier membership within your full membership, and then your executive members are, arguably have more say. But manufacturers at the moment, and even more so now, are in an extremely, extremely competitive market. I mean, one of the most historically famous manufacturers in this country, who my grandfather used to make burners for, all of a sudden is massively down on boiler sales. They've got rid of a whole commercial department. They've reduced their 2-shift factory to 1 shift. They've got redundancies. That's quite unique in this industry. So there's a lot of competition. And manufacturers' main raison, I can't think of the Latin word, raison d'etre, which is different to ours. Charlotte and Craig, as I've said to some listeners before, are very, very vested, have proper interest in this industry. But arguably, the manufacturers people, there's number one thing they really want, and that's sales, because otherwise their business goes down. And we are getting to a critical situation with some of the companies out there. So when they come together as a manufacturers association, well, they're not as an association together, the fundamental thing they will need is something that supports their individual businesses. So whatever's decided amongst themselves has to sort of be beneficial to their individual businesses, which arguably then isn't possibly what the actual society wants or engineers want, which you could argue are the two most important cohorts. Because you've got these big entities, huge entities. I mean, some of these, we're talking multi-billion international companies, some of them, especially if you consider their working groups, the groups they're in internationally. Their number one thing is they need to sustain their sales. And so whatever is decided within an association has to be able to appease that. And I think that's what's worrying some people. They just don't see the industry going as quickly as it possibly could because of that reason, because these manufacturing giants who are competitors to each other, but all come together within an association as friends, and they are doing good stuff, like as we've just said, your thing about the commissioning sheet and etc. You're going to be, and that's a good reason why you exist. But they are worried about this whole thing of very, very powerful competitors that are all sort of coming together to sort of decide stuff on behalf of engineers and society.
So I guess I'd take a step back from that. And, we mentioned earlier around the importance of an association so that those individual commercial interests don't sort of, they're not, the loudest voice isn't heard in that sense, which, historically it has been without associations being present. I think in terms of sort of the sector, we all want to see growth. Of course, that generates and relates to sales from a manufacturing point of view, but our raison d'etre is to accelerate the deployment of heat pumps throughout the UK, and doing that will benefit all of our members across the supply chain. In terms of getting voices heard, which I think maybe is where you're sort of coming from, our executive membership tier does have manufacturers in. It has installation businesses, larger ones, I accept, but installation businesses and maintenance providers and energy companies predominantly. But within our full membership category, which also attend all of our working groups and our workshops and our consultation engagement opportunities, we've got the full suite of the supply chain, which is, I think, why we very confidently now say we do represent that complete supply chain. What we're seeing from, and not within the association, this is just me watching what our members do on their own social media platforms and their own outreach programs, is they're differentiating themselves based on their installer offerings. they know they sell products to installers who then sell them to the customers, and how to engage that installer market is absolutely pivotal for sales. How do we get our product to be easiest to install, quickest to install? How do we support installers in understanding how to install it? Is that on-site monitoring? Is it on-site support for their first number of installations? Is it digitalizing the process through apps to support them? What additional training can we provide, and how can we best offer that to suit the individuals who want it? And I guess the ask from the Heat Pump Association is what the government want too, right? It's how do we accelerate the growth of heat pumps throughout the UK? And our core asks, as we've said, are usually very high policy. It's Future Home Standard, electricity and gas price rebalancing. That's not being driven by manufacturers' commercial interests, specifically. That's around demand side enablers that will grow the whole marketplace. How do we get this proposition so that the consumers demand it, that they are asking for it, they're desperate for it? How do we make this make sense from a financial point of view for the consumer? And then from who will then in turn ask the installers about it and will drive the demand in that sense. Because we've discussed before that we're seeing a lot of people successfully completing a recognized training course, but that's not the end. That's the beginning. That's the initial qualification to start. That's what we need following there, is the opportunities to enhance that knowledge and for them to have the demand in place to then put that knowledge into practice. And you'll have spoken to Nesta about their Start at Home project, which we're really supportive of. I think it's really interesting as a model and a concept. If an installer completes training and then has the opportunity to install a heat pump in their property or one of their friends or family members' properties, that buy-in for wanting to get that installation right, because it's going to directly affect somebody that they know personally, but the ability to learn from that, learn the controls, learn how it's used in operation, and get the support, I think is really key to driving uptake and interest and engagement across the supply chain in the market.
Yeah, regarding trading, I mean, we all could do a whole complete episode around it because obviously that's my expertise. I never like saying I'm a great engineer, but the training aspect of it and understanding the science and psychology of education, that's my bag. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, is it? I mean, because you've got these really, really large manufacturers. I mean, I don't know how much you're allowed to say because obviously you've got a duty of care towards your executive members. But I mean, one of the big problems folk have started to realise that exists with the HHIC is this tiered system. So the more turnover, the bigger the voice. If you're a company that's got a certain turnover in this country, you had a louder voice, and to the point where one of the biggest boiler manufacturers on the planet didn't have a loud voice because in this country they were only selling about 6%. Had 6% of the market share. So they bypassed the HIC back in the days of Boiler Plus to get their information to government. So there's always this concern that people that are at the sort of the top of the hierarchy of association get the louder voice, and then does that benefit the industry as a whole? I'm assuming. You all get in a room together. Everyone's nice. Like I say, that some of the same people are going to the boiler working group as well for the HHIC, as we know. You mentioned controls there, Charlotte. So that is one thing that really interests a whole, it interests government, it interests Nesta. This whole thing about controls, manufacturers' controls. So there's this question is, well, if manufacturers' controls can do heating, why have we got third-party controls actually involved? So that then comes under BEMA. You've got members that are third-party controls because they're trying to get into that market. And as we know, that's a bit of a problem because historically heat pumps are being put in with third-party controls. That's why they weren't performing well. So again, it does seem as if this conflict of interest, you've got this whole massive, these are powerful entities, these manufacturer control companies. They really, really are. And they want a share of that pie. And, how do you sort of help keep all your members sort of happy with each other. I suppose that's quite tough. I don't know. Poor old Craig's got his work cut. I mean, the great thing about Craig is he knows this industry so well. He's, which again, I mean, are there members? I should imagine there are members who actually don't probably know this industry that well. You know, they're probably from comms teams or marketing teams that go into your meetings, but who probably don't know the industry as well as Craig. I mean, that's always been a bit of a problem because arguably, I would say our industry's been run by marketing for a lot of years who didn't understand the science of heat, and that's always been a bit of an issue.
I don't know. Yeah, we're trying to unpick a lot of things here, but so we have the way that we've set the organisation up is we have different working groups. Okay, so we have a technical working group, we have a marketing working group, we have a training working group, and like we have task and finish
Commercial.
You've got
commercial
before,
and task and finish groups and other things like that. And we have quarterly executive board meetings and full members meetings. And those quarterly meetings, we kind of like, we discuss what we go. Here's what we're working on. Here's what we're doing, and we debate. Sometimes we argue. Like sometimes we don't get to a point where everybody agrees, and we choose to focus on other things. And then the technical working group, we make sure that if it's an exec member and if it's a director that turns up to the executive meeting, like we make sure that it's really clear what's being discussed in the technical working group, so that organisation can then send the relevant person or persons to that technical working group to focus on the technical elements, the same as the training elements, same as the marketing elements, same as the commercial elements, to make sure that, you know, when we're getting into the weeds and the detail, it's the right people like doing the doing.
And I guess just to build on that, those working groups that, you know, the membership of those working groups are full exec, and in some parts associate members are invited to join those. And what tends to happen is they make recommendations for what they want to see happen that go up to the exec, and we've never had an example where exec have said no. So whilst the executive tier, you know, that is the board, as it were, the feedback for what the sector wants, what the industry wants, comes from those working groups up to that group to approve, and then it goes into our work plan and we deliver and develop it. And that's where the RCD guidance came from, for example. So, you know, ultimately we're a membership organisation. We would only operate with members with money from members. You know, that's the way that we're set up. We're not a charity, and you know, we can't deliver outputs without having a budget to deliver to. You know, some would say that those who make the most money should pay the most, and I guess that's the model that we tried to introduce. We changed our full membership model structure last year to introduce that tier, because we acknowledged that, you know, not everybody has the same turnover, and actually to put a flat rate in there doesn't allow the people who we perhaps want to hear from to access at that level. So exactly why we're introducing that installer representative role, who will come to all of those meetings. So we will always have a powerful, strong voice from the installers, even though they perhaps don't have the funds to pay for the membership category at that level. But also not just the funds, it's about their time as well. And you know, we're very aware that their time is money to them, and we want to, you know, so we are listening and amending the way that we operate in order to better represent the whole market. And I really hope that's being you know, seen and visible, and you know, that we're not just sticking our head in the sand and saying we're not changing. You know, we're very reactive, and you know, we want to best represent the whole sector, because else you're not doing a good job, and we really want to do a good job.
And probably something to highlight, when we get together as an association, I have to read out a wonderfully worded competition law, which I think I've only not stumbled over twice in my 2 years. But that is to remind people of the guidelines of what we can and cannot talk about in that room. And we're very, very strict on that. And it is formal and it is minuted to make sure that, things that fall under competition law do not get discussed. And start thinking that we might get into those areas, like it's mine and Charlotte's job to shut it down straight away, to make sure that we're not doing anything like that. That's the same in all associations. And like, to your point, there's conflicts of interest and there's large companies. If there was an association, do you really believe that those large organizations wouldn't talk to each other in an informal setting? So, we're in a formal setting. We've got clear guidance and guardrails of what can and cannot be talked about. And we come to a consensus that will, and we are very, very much focused on improving getting the deployment of heat pumps, but making sure that those heat pumps are fitted on quality systems, and it's defining what a quality system is and the controls and making sure that all of those things are done. Like, not saying that we're going to get it right 100% of the time. There's different learnings going on, and there's the training that you guys do, and there's other people on social media that do a fantastic job of educating and showing people the differences in systems and what flow rates mean and delta T's and all of that, and they go into detail that we can't really go into. But it is about getting people together to make sure that we're promoting the industry as a whole, and an outcome of that is a growing market and more heat pumps and hopefully more quality systems. Like, you have to remember, manufacturers don't want their products fitted on crappy systems, because the only thing that happens is you get warranty call-outs, and those warranty call-outs add cost to the heat pump. You add cost to a heat pump, the price goes up because you have to cover those costs. So, like, everybody wants their appliance to be fitted on a high quality system. Nobody wants it on a crappy system that costs lots of money to run and always breaks down and can't defrost and all that kind of stuff. So it's building that up and
I think
different ways to get there.
Underlying all this, Nathan, and you're the biggest advocate of this, is consumer satisfaction rates. That's actually what's going to make or break the sector. And whilst as a trade association, we aren't consumer focused, we don't have a direct consumer sort of engagement outreach like some of our other friends like Nesta, for example, and the Get a Heat Pump and the Visit a Heat Pump. They're fantastic. We don't pretend or try to do that, and engaging with consumers is really, really hard and really, really expensive. But their satisfaction is crucial to this transition. Their awareness, their acceptance, and also, their satisfaction levels, and tracking those, which people are doing, and we monitor that very closely, is the biggest indicator of success of this market alongside the growth. Growth without consumer satisfaction is going to be very short-term growth. And that's as an association, we want the market to grow in a way that is sustainable, that supports the whole sector, the installer base to upskill and to grow alongside the consumers being satisfied with the installations at the end of the day. And that's really where we will track the impact and the progress of the market.
I mean, it's an interesting point you picked, because, like I say, this consumer thing, we're all very aware of the negative stories that come out in the press. I mean, you said something there, Craig. Manufacturers don't want their particular brand to be on crappy systems, which is right. But in the real world, that isn't happening, because in the real world, you've got regional sales directors, or however the manufacturer's been structured to sell their stuff. So we have got a situation where new builds are unfortunately having systems put in that aren't performing. And ironically, I'm sitting next door to a person that knocked on my brother's door the other day and said, "I hear your brother's involved in heat pumps." And my brother, being my brother's, like, "Yeah, he is. I think he's quite high up." And in the village that my brothers and I grew up in, they've had 100 eco homes built, and all the months in winter they were paying around £400 a month electric bills. So the residents have set up a WhatsApp group, right. So this person who my brother knows said, "Can you get involved? Can you help us out?" We've tried to have intervention measures from the various parties that were involved in that install. And I said, "Yeah, I can pull some strings." So I have got the manufacturer I've contacted. They are going to come and do come and see the systems. I've got one of the UK's top heating engineers who I value very much. He's going to come and have a look at them and just sort of survey a few systems, see if there's a generic thing that's going wrong. And I've also got, Haven Wise, because they and I were sort of quoted in a Telegraph article the other day, and they're going to come and monitor. So luckily for that village where I grew up, and my mum passed away in 2008, her bench is there. We put a bench up there. So I don't want my village where I grew up having rubbish heat pump systems. Now I'm in a position where I can do something about it. Lots and lots of other people aren't, and I talk to a lot of manufacturers, quite a lot, and there's even worry of some of the people that are working for the manufacturers saying, "Look, this new build market is getting big, very competitive." Because I think, I mean, I'll ask you this question in a minute. I think that we're going to see a bit of a slowdown or maybe a plateau of retrofit, but where social housing sector, new build sector is still going to go upwards, and it's getting very competitive amongst the manufacturers about whose stuff is going into new builds, because we're talking about developers could be 50 units or 5,000 units. Lot of competition that they're all trying to vie for. And of course, when you come down to the granular level of who actually works for a manufacturer, what's their actual job role? Well, a lot of them is KPIs. They have to be seen as selling lots of stuff. So there is this argument that this stuff is going in that's not being very well designed. I mean, I don't know how we mitigate that, because that whole development sector is very heterogeneous. We've got thousands of developers out there in this country. I mean, everyone thinks it's the big six, but there's lots of developers out there that do predominantly most of the homes. And I do worry that we're going to get even more poor install, because at the end of the day, as we know, the consumer, if they're in a cold home or it's costing them a lot of money, that's a big news story. And I think we've got to be quite careful about how we manage that. And that comes down to manufacturers. They've got to really I think, really look into this a bit more carefully. I mean, I haven't got the answers. I'm just saying, because you guys meet with the manufacturers all the time.
Okay, so I would argue that it's not down to the manufacturers.
Yeah.
It's down to the contractor or the installer that has fitted that system. Because the way it works in new build is...
Some manufacturers do the design, though, Craig.
Yeah, no. That's
in new build, yeah.
So generally how it works is you'll get a tender from a house builder, and you'll find out what houses they're building, and you will do an indemnified heating design. Yeah. And that will be generally a 3D drawing showing where the pipes are, where the elbows are, how many clips. They can be very, very descriptive. They will be based on the U values of the drawing and everything like that. And that will be done, and then that will be given back to the house builder, and then the house builder will go to their contractors, and the contractor will say, "I can do it for this much or that much," and then it might be subcontracted again and again. I've got experience of a house building site where the contractor was trained, but the person that actually did the install was 3 subcontractors down. So, we are working with the Future Homes Hub to support them, because there is an evolution. Controversially, sometimes an overconfident gas engineer can end up putting himself in a bit of bother when it comes to heat pumps, because he's always used 2 bundles of 22 and a bundle of 15, and now he needs to use 28 mil for the primaries, and because of the flow rate, and he hasn't, because there's a disconnect between the design and the contractor, and that's where the manufacturer can support, but and it's where the house builder has to step in as well and make sure that the contractor that they are appointing to do their heating system has gone through at least some product orientation training. And manufacturers are putting more efforts into the design. I know that lots of them, once they get burnt on one site, they will spend a lot of time making sure that they are talking with the site managers and making sure that the contractor, like commissioning and controls, has a huge part to play in this. And then some of the guys that you talk to that work in the world, they spend a good amount of time explaining how their new heating system works to their client. When you're in new build land, you are fitting a heating system, you are potentially commissioning that heating system, and then somebody might not be moving in for months, and then they've got a new heating system and they might not know how to use it properly, and they might be doing it, I'll have it on for half an hour in the morning and then I'll turn it off, and then I'll have it on for 4 hours at night, and the house is cold and the running costs are really high because nobody's taken the time to physically explain how a heat pump heating system can work and how the control should be set up. And they might have a bundle and a pack, but everybody's time poor now. Like, too long, didn't read, and then you get a situation, and it might be that the controls are set up poorly. It might be that the system is set up poorly. Like I can give you experience of mine. I went to a site and there was that it wasn't functioning. There was no two ways about it. We didn't know why. Yeah, on one site we went there with a heat gun, and the builder had forgot to put in the insulation on the top floor. I think I've spotted the problem of why the top floor is not warm. On another site, we didn't know what it was wrong. We took up a floorboard and somebody had used microboard because that's what they had on the van. And then it was 11 kilowatt heat pump. Like,
I think what
good looks like. And there is a role of manufacturers, but there is a role of contractors and installers having some ownership and some quality installs. It's very like, nobody wants to be in the Spider-Man then where everybody's pointing at somebody else, do they? And that's the situation where we're getting in, and that's where we're trying to work collaboratively across the supply chain to make sure that things are communicated clearly, concisely, and that consumer handover bit is taken into consideration. But everyone's got different experiences of different problems. We need to define the problem properly and then figure out what the proactive solution is, rather than saying it's their responsibility or it's their responsibility or it's their responsibility. It's kind of like, it's kind of, we're all in it together.
Well, there is a manufacturer piece to this. So, I mean, I haven't gone on survey these homes yet. I'm going to wait for the manufacturers to get involved and
sensible.
And I think what's happened is it's all got a bit quiet. I think the developers have sort of looked into who I am, for instance, and the contractors who are involved looked at, and probably a bit nervous because I haven't heard back from them. I need some information that I can then pass to the manufacturer. But talking about manufacturers, what I have heard about these homes is they've got temperature sensors in every single room in the concrete for underfloor heating, and they've got control in every single room. And what I think's and this comes back to manufacturers and control manufacturers specifically, they realise there's an emerging market. They want a piece of that pie, so they're getting involved now. They're there to sell stuff. Now, as people are hopefully learning, and the consumers are helping people, the very sort of technical consumers, like people like Mick Wall, who's been on the podcast, and Tristan Lee. You don't need all this control. And of course, the control manufacturers don't want to hear it. They will love the fact that these £1 million homes have a little thing in every single room, and you've got a temperature sensor in the screed, because in their minds it sounds like a really, really high spec system. But you don't need all that stuff. And it's because manufacturers, I haven't checked if this particular one, well, the one I think it might be, is a member of you guys, but they want to sell their stuff and they're thinking of every which way possible to sell that. And it means some of them are forming alliances with heat pump manufacturers, because that historically went on 15, 20 years ago, before there was any sort of loud voices that said, hang on a minute, we don't need all this silly control. And like you said earlier, Craig, it didn't really matter too much in the boiler world because gas was cheap, whether people had a low compensation or weather compensation control, and this is where I struggle with association. I mean, like Beamer, for instance, I'm quite critical of them because they run that controls association. They, at the moment, all their comms is around EPCs. And I'm thinking to myself, sort out your own industry first, please. You've got a lot of members that are just trying to sell kit into homes left, right, and centre. Let the other people that are experts in EPCs deal with that. So, manufacturers, you are right. We've got this whole thing of contractors don't really understand, but they're getting designed. So, who's doing the designs? And of course, the subcontractors that put it in, they're just putting it into design. No one then at the end of it knows how to commission these systems. Everyone's getting blamed. Well, who is supposed to commission the system? And of course, if you've got all this control on the system,
where is it, the plumber?
yeah. But if you've got all that amount of control on the system that's all fighting each other, and this is the problem. That's a manufacturer problem because they are all trying to sell. But we are the most competitive market, I would argue, in Europe with heating technology. And you've got everyone that sort of manufactures stuff is wants to manufacture here, and I think it's a problem. I mean, you guys might be the ones to sort it because you guys bring them all together. And I know Craig is, if he hears a load of rubbish, he's willing to stand up and say, no, I don't think that's right. So good on you again, Craig, for that.
I think
go on.
What's really interesting, Nathan, is the smart and secure electricity system consultation response the government published the other day. So this move towards interoperability of controls and ensuring that energy saving appliances, which heat pumps are within that definition, are able to work with to benefit from the tariffs, the special tariffs, the half-hourly settlements, the flexibility, and how controls will change to support heat pumping becoming in that way.
Oh, you're breaking up, Charlotte. I don't know if you can still hear me. Oh, poor old Charlotte's breaking up.
Posing, I think 20.
I might turn my.
Is that better now? From me, SSES.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, if we turn cameras off, it might work better. If you could repeat that, Charlotte, because I'm useless at editing, and I won't be able to edit. Well, I could edit it out, but it takes me a lot of hard work.
Yeah, no problem. So I was just saying, just on the controls aspect, I think what's going to be really interesting over the next 2 to 4 years is how the market responds to the government's published consultation response to the smart and secure electricity systems, and the definition of energy saving appliances, of which heat pumps are one, and the move to ensure that there is interoperability and that heat pumps can benefit from flexible and smart tariffs and make use of the half-hourly settlements. So I think from a controls point of view, the controls world is going to move, or is going to change quite considerably, and the interactions with manufacturers and controls to ensure that they comply with those new regulations, and from a consumer experience point of view to ensure that consumers can benefit from the clever tariffs and the half-hourly settlements, as I said, and things going forward. So it's definitely a world that's changing, and I'm interested to see how the market reacts to that over the next few years.
Yeah, home energy management is. I mean, you could argue for a few more years it's going to be more complex for installers, more complex for homeowners, and also it's another reason why controls manufacturers are really pushing to get their specific brand model in that space, because they argue, oh look, we're all going interoperability and all this stuff, and you need us, and etc. etc. So I think we're going to have a bit of confusion for a few years.
It's definitely interesting. You're right on the controls front. Like, if you get a load of development engineers together in a room they will come up with at least 500,000 features that they want to design into their control. Like whether those features are necessarily required for the normal person doesn't really enter their head, because they're engineers and they're solving problems, and they're making sure that they can do as much as they possibly can through the control and all the rest of it. And that's where the product manager within that company has to try and make sure that the focus stays on the customer groups and making sure that the control meets the requirements and isn't overcomplicated, but does have the ability to do stuff. And it's difficult because, some of the engineers that we both speak to want to be able to go into the nth degree and look at all the detail. My mum wants to be able to turn the heating up and down and on and off, and you have to bridge those gaps. And you are also correct. There is a tendency for over control. Everybody, I don't get it personally. Like, if you have, we'll go back to sizing systems. If you have sized the system correctly and you have balanced the system correctly, you shouldn't need room by room heating control.
Before I forget, Charlotte and Craig, one of the questions that's posed to me, but not on that LinkedIn post I put, is the electrification of heat project. And I've already mentioned how I introduced Tristan to sort of some of the people in the government energy department, and then we did a lunch and learn for them. So the electrification of heat project is, as you would probably know better than most, it had an average SCOP, the heat pumps about 700 were performing at. And that average has been used as an admission against us all, who are sort of advocating for heat pump technology, because it was around about 2.8. And the question kind of posed was to me, there's been a lot of people sort of, Tristan and Glyn sort of dug into the data. They got the data and have built that sort of platform that we can all now look at to see how well individual systems are performing and do all sorts of wonderful things with it. The question was asked was, did the Heat Pump Association do anything with the data? Because, like I say, again, we've got the HHRC predominantly and others have been using that data against us. Heat pumps can only perform at 2.8, and you'd need a system performing at 3.5 before you get cost parity with a gas system. This kind of thing. I mean, so the question was asked, did the HPA do anything with that data? Have they spoke to the manufacturers? Because there's only probably about 3 or 4 manufacturers involved with that project. Your ex-employer being one, Craig, and a couple of others. Have you approached them and said, what are your opinions on why these were performing not as well as they kind of should have been? I mean, did you get involved with that project at all, or discussed with government about it? Anything?
So, I mean, we weren't involved in the project. I think that's, and it was, whilst the results were published recently, it'd been going on for a number of years, as you know, and there was an interim phase. I think we've read the reports and we've digested the information, and there were lots of learnings from those reports in terms of refrigerant and the impact of refrigerants or not on efficiency. But I think, as we both know, there's lots of different factors that impact the in situ performance of products, and its use, as well as design and emitter sizing, and consumer behaviours, the thermal performance of that building, the installation practices, which we've spoken about before, and as a sector organisation, as an association, we're really keen to support enhancing the efficiencies, the in situ efficiency of heat pumps. And government are looking at this too. Their recent consultation on eco was around how do we drive up efficiency and standards through pay for performance, for example. So I think we are going to see more around measured in situ efficiencies, and we know that manufacturers are already doing this quite often and contacting consumers to make suggestions and diagnose problems if they have them before even before they come, perhaps, but also to sort of pinpoint how the product could be optimized to lead to a better efficiency if it's run longer or whatever that might be. So I think the sector are taking lots of learnings from that electrification of heat project, and an innovation is being done to better support the efficiency rates. I don't know, Craig, if you've got anything to add to that one.
Bit of a rabbit warren that we've done on the rundown. So yeah, okay. So the challenge with all of those things is like similar to the new build, like the contractors that are active in those sort of markets may not have spent as much time as required in the handover to make sure that the consumer knows how to use the controls, which definitely happens in more one-off scenario. The challenge that we have with that is it's a design and manufacturing issue. It's not an issue, it's a challenge. We need to find a way in which consumers are confident in the control to be able to leave it alone, so it leaves them warm and comfortable. We have spent 2 decades or more telling people to turn TRVs down to save money, and that impacts the flow rate and doesn't really help heat pumps. But we've been saying that for 2 decades. We've been telling people to, we've had on-off controls, so it's either set for 21 or 20 or 19 or off, and we need to move to having a comfort temperature and a setback temperature, and the amount of time that things are on. Like going back to your physics argument, like in thermodynamics, if suddenly heating engineers were framed as applied physicians, I'm sure they're applied physics people, it would be, the credence and the voice that they would have would probably be a lot better. But when you've designed a system for a lower flow temperature, then you need to remind people that it's going to take a little bit longer to warm the room up, because the differentiation between the room temperature and the emitter temperature is lower, so it takes a little bit longer, and things like that. There were points of frustration in that electrification of heat. There were points where some of the manufacturers that were involved weren't actually informed that there was any challenges, so they couldn't be proactive and support that. I think it's fantastic that heat pumps get monitored so closely. I would love the same to happen on the incumbent technology, and we can see what's going on. But let's not kick that hornet's nest either.
Well, they've just done that, haven't they? I mean, as you'll know, the government just released their report on over 4,000 Worcester Bosch boilers were being monitored. Trying to think about the guy at the department who sort of he listens to podcasts. So they just sort of published that data, because there's some positives that come out of that, actually. So one of the things they have proved with it, which obviously good engineers already knew, is people don't have to go out and change radiators to be these massive huge size radiators, because this monitored data said a lot of people actually have got radiators that are quite good enough for heat pump systems already. Yeah. What it also picked up is that none of these, because the Bosch make quite a good boiler actually that can be controlled very well, and none of them had low compensation or weather compensation. They're just on off, which is why boilers break quick, which is why we ended up with the biggest market in Europe. One of the reasons. We've mentioned Eco4, but I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole. I don't know if the Heat Pump Association do have a sort of a quick sort of, as you know, Craig, and you and I have chatted about this. Unfortunately, there's some poor work that seems to be going on in that sort of arena. I didn't know whether the HPA are involved, have to get involved. I mean, obviously, you've got energy companies as members now, and obviously the Eco is an energy company obligation type scheme. I didn't know whether it's anything you talk about.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And, you know, as we've said, consumer satisfaction is absolutely key to the success of this transition. And we're very keen to support quality installs. We've been working with government on Eco4. That's due to end in March next year. So what happens beyond Eco4, I think, is where the focus is. You know, what needs to change in order to better protect consumers and to support high quality installations. So we're involved in some workshops looking at that specifically, working with the energy companies and the members. I think what's really interesting is looking at Eco4 satisfaction levels relative to boiler upgrade scheme consumer satisfaction levels, and looking at the differences in how those two schemes operate. So under both, the installation needs to be MCS certified, but through the boiler upgrade scheme, there's an outreach program which is conducted by MCS, who call every single consumer who's had a heat pump installed under the boiler upgrade scheme to ask them about their experience, to put their name on that consumer's radar, to say, if you've got any concerns, you know, come to us, and seeks to get sort of initial validation or verification of the quality or the consumer experience regarding that heat pump install. That outreach program doesn't happen under Eco4, and I think that's an oversight, because I think, you know, that's a missed opportunity to get data. It's a missed opportunity to check in with that consumer and see how satisfied they are, and it reaffirms the sort of touch point if an issue occurs, to resolve it quickly. So I think there are things that are being looked at to compare how both schemes operate, in terms of sort of oversight and engagement with the client. But it's challenging, isn't it? Because who is the client? You know, boiler upgrade scheme, it's very clear that contract is with the homeowner and that installer. Under Eco4, the contract regime and the sort of lines of reporting are very different, and there's lots of lines of reporting, lots of scheme oversights. And, you know, we've spoken about spider webs in this podcast. It seems to become a spider web of pointing blame at others, and I think we need to strip away that spider web and make it very clear where the lines of responsibility lie under Eco4. So yeah, we're absolutely sort of involved and keen, very keen, to make sure that, you know, whatever follows Eco4 is very much focused on consumer satisfaction.
Yeah, we want the good positive stories. I mean, that's a system that if we had really good positive stories from, you know, it helps us as an industry, doesn't it? And
well, yeah, and I've been trying, Nathan, I don't know if you can help, I've been really trying to get DESNZ and Ofgem to publish that data from the boiler upgrade scheme outreach program, because it's, you know, my understanding is there's really, really high satisfaction levels. The feedback that MCS got by that program, I understand, is really, really good. And to be able to sort of shout about that, I think, would be really positive and overcome some of the negative media stories that we've had in terms of the positive experiences that tens of thousands of customers have had over the last few years and going forward as bus continues. So,
yeah, I'll definitely try and help with that. I mean, I think it's one of the sort of things about human nature, isn't it? If you have something that's working, like my brother's TV, I don't have a TV, but my brother's TV works quite well. But he doesn't get on a WhatsApp group or a LinkedIn forum or Facebook group and say, "Oh, my TV works well." But if it wasn't working and the manufacturer wasn't replacing it, it'd be straight on a group saying, "Yeah, they're rubbish, whatever." And so the bad stories always seem to be much louder than stuff that works, because people don't really talk about the stuff that works.
Well, would anybody read an article that had the headline of "Family gets heat pump gets new heating system, it works"?
They like controversy, don't they?
Exactly. Like, if you link it, like, you can draw some parities to the EV market. Like, how many articles did you see about EV cars breaking down or catching fire and all the rest of it, and then suddenly they've disappeared? Like, it's a constant barrage of negativity around heat pumps, and, you know, they don't work, and, you know, mine cost me a fortune, and all the rest of it. But one of the key roles for us at the Heat Pump Association is making sure that we're highlighting the positivity, and we're building up the quality levels, and we are tackling some of these challenges and these issues, like the new build site that you were talking about. Like, if we can support on that, let us know.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's loads of stuff in the background, like educating MPs. Like, we did a see hear feel a heat pump event, and we regularly get questions like, can you tell me how this hydrogen pump works? Like, so we're doing stuff like that. It's the quiet work in the background that kind of plugs away to make sure that
we're taking that up to Scotland, aren't we, Craig, in September as well? So we're going to Holyrood to take working heat pumps to the MSPs, to give them an opportunity to come and hear and see and feel and try and dispel those myths that they're noisy and that they don't work, and give them the opportunity to ask the questions, which, again, is an output that an association can do that has a better levels of engagement than one commercial entity operating on its own.
I agree with that. If you ever want me to do a little bit of a learning session for MPs and on the science of how heat moves in and out of a building, I will. Because I think that's one of the big problems. What these myths that come about, they can't work. It's because people don't sort of understand the real, and it's not even getting taught on our 3-day courses. The real fundamentals of how heat and temperature are two different things. Most people don't realise that. If I was to ask most heating engineers, even technical directors, how do you measure heat? They all go Kelvin or Celsius. I go, no, that's how you measure temperature. Heat is measured in joules. But I've learned over years of very simple ways to be able to help people understand how heat moves in and out of a home. And once they kind of grasp it, they think, oh, right, okay, yeah, I got that now. So if you ever want help with me doing that with sort of people like MPs, because as we know, we've got MPs that think this stuff doesn't work, and they're sitting in offices where it's heating them.
Yeah.
Guys, it's been so nice for you to come on. I just want my listeners to know, like I say, this. For me, this has been a bit of a strange episode because I have pushed back against them. They're two lovely people. I know them well. If you ever see them I think they'll both be at the Installer Show. Please go and have a chat with Craig and a chat with Charlotte. Have a cup of coffee. Charlotte won't drink too much coffee before lunchtime, as she's told me earlier. Charlotte, thank you ever so much for coming on. Craig, thank you ever so much for coming on. And I hope my listeners sort of find some value in this particular episode.
Yeah, it's been good. Thanks for the invite.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah, always a pleasure to speak to you, Nathan, and thanks for having us on and hearing our point of view. I hope it's been helpful.
I think it has. Yeah, it's nice. Thank you ever so much, guys.
Yes.